got about more than half of our attendees joining us. We already have about 60 or so. We're standing by for Lynn Turknett, who is one of our speakers today. But let's go ahead and get started. I really do value everyone's time and really appreciate you all being here. Lisa will be keeping the mute button on until a little bit later in the program, when we really look forward to hearing from all of you. If you have questions, you can go ahead and send them to me directly if you'd like under the chat function. But we do want to hear from you. So once again, my name is Cynthia Good with PINK. This is our first Zoominar on leading through crisis. We are, of course, not happy about COVID-19, but we certainly are happy to be with you here today and to offer this to our valued partners and to everyone in the PINK community as a public service during this difficult time. I'm wondering how everybody is, so definitely let us know on the chat button. We have muted you once again, as I mentioned, and we will look forward to hearing from you in a little bit. We have heard from a number of PINK's partners who are dealing with a set of very particular challenges, of course, never before experienced, or at least never experienced to this magnitude. As you know, many states are reopening for business. Many of them today. I know Georgia, of course, is one of those. The president has indicated he will not extend the federal distancing guidelines that do expire today. So certainly that affects everyone's business. Nevertheless, the health and the financial toll continues to escalate. Modern history has provided no blueprint for a pandemic response. It's up to us. So today we brought in some experts to talk about the most burning issues that organizations are facing, and really how not just to get through this and manage, but how to lead through this unprecedented ordeal. So joining us is Lynn Turknett. Lynn, are you there?
I am, and I hope that you can hear me. I'm on a bit of an unstable connection here.
I can hear you, and you sound fantastic. We understand that technological issues do happen. Lynn Turknett is a veteran executive coach. She is the co-founder of Turknett Leadership Group, and nobody knows the executive coaching space better than Lynn. Lynn, we're really happy to have you. So also with us today is Carolyn Homberger. Carolyn is in the trenches. She is the Chief Risk Officer of ACI Worldwide. That's a billion-dollar payments firm that does business in more than 90 countries. She's also a mother of 3. We'll hear what that's like in a moment. Hi, Carolyn.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you or meet you all virtually. And thanks for a couple of folks I see from ACI who have joined. So happy to be here, Cynthia.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know you have a million things going on. As we know, there certainly is an opportunity, I think, during this time for real leaders to shine and even to set up new best practices that can benefit their organizations immediately, as well as for years to come. So our goal today is to offer some tools and takeaways that we hope you'll be able to use now during COVID-19, as well as in the long run. So Lynn, talk a little bit about what's going on, what you're seeing in your role as executive coach for some of the top companies and executives. What are you seeing leaders wrestling with most this week as some of the states begin reopening for business?
Well, I think throughout this, everybody's really wrestling with the uncertainty of this situation. You said before, this is unlike anything we have ever seen before. One of the organizations we're working with has a large research facility, and they were trying to move people out of that, figure out what to do. And the person we were talking with said, everybody was looking for answers that nobody had. People thought leaders had information that they didn't have. I think that was true initially in this situation, and I think it's really still very much true now. We're also seeing, obviously, now and forever, people are trying to make decisions. You talked about the difference in leadership and management. People get stuck right now, I think, in the executing and figuring out what they're going to do, the management side of the equation. And it's really tough to deal with the people side.
Right. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. That was great. Thanks, Lynn. And Carolyn, what are you seeing at your organization just today that you are needing to step up and do in order to lead? What are you guys going through right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm our Chief Risk Officer, and I'm actually leading ACI's global response to COVID-19. And I think a couple of things, thoughts on leadership versus management. I really believe leadership enables management. So early on with the pandemic, you know, I really recognized this was a novel event. Cynthia, I think you mentioned earlier something that we've never seen in modern history. So a lot of the traditional risk management responses simply just don't apply in a situation like this. So we employed a lot of, you know, agile and design thinking techniques to, you know, best manage our response. So instead of, you know, traditionally identify, assess, follow a plan and implement, it's more about learn, adapt, explore, and experiment.
Right.
So,
because I mean, you were really on the front lines. I know that one of your pieces of business is in China.
yes.
So you were dealing with some of these issues before the rest of the country. What was that like?
Yeah, so we mobilized our crisis team actually in early January, as soon as this, you know, as soon as it started to impact our business. And I think a lot of the things we did and learned early on with some of that framework of recognizing it was a novel event, we're equally implementing now that we're starting to think about reopening. And in fact, today we announced that we are going to reopen very slowly in a phased, methodical approach. But that we're going to be reopening a handful of pilot sites and welcoming folks back, where both the World Health Organization and the local governments are now, you know, starting to relax things. And I think some of the topics we'll cover, Cynthia, around communication start to become really important as we start to get back into this new normal.
Yeah, and I do want to go back to Lynn in a second, but you know, you're in the trenches, as most leaders are today. How are you able to put out the fires and execute some of the key things that need to happen right now, but nevertheless stay above that a little bit in order to really lead? What's your trick for doing that?
Yeah, I think it's two things. I think one, I'm a big believer in psychological safety and creating an environment both through communication as well as through culture where folks feel empowered to speak up. And, you know, I've really tried to infuse that into our communication to the company as well as we talk to different leaders across the company. I think the second thing that I'm really saying to all our leaders, I use a saying with my team: assume positive intent. And listen, there's things right now that we're going to do that, you know, some of them work out really well and they're well thought out, well planned. And there's also mistakes we're going to make. But, you know, obviously with the pandemic, the stakes are a lot higher. So we spend a lot of time, you know, creating that environment where you can speak up, but equally saying what we're doing with positive intent, and here's why.
Cool. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But Lynn, getting back to your point just about what differentiates managing from leading, can you talk about that a little bit, the difference? Boil it down for us.
There are lots of ways to think about that, but another thing I like to think about is there are two kinds of challenges, and there's a guy named Ron Heifetz who talks a lot about this. There are technical challenges, which are easily handled by management, by process, by I thought Carolyn's examples there were fantastic, by the old kinds of ways we've dealt with risk. And then there are adaptive challenges. And when there are adaptive challenges, it requires leadership, because that's about mobilizing people. And it's easy in a situation like this to try to use technical answers when you've got to really adapt. I love Carolyn's example too of using experimentation and agile processes. Those are leadership processes to me.
Great point. And Carolyn, talk a little bit about in the beginning, some of the challenges that you faced around human behavior and what happened and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think there were a couple of things. One, you know, we were closing sites and starting to restrict travel, we got, or at least I got, a lot of pushback. And it's amazing because, of course, now as we're starting to reopen, you know, we're getting some of the same feedback around this is too aggressive, this isn't the right time. And I think a couple of things, I've tried to communicate to people beyond the two themes I talked about earlier is it takes time for people to really think through what it is they're dealing with, both personally with their teams, as well as, you know, some site and geographical specific considerations. So I really like to try to give people that space to prepare themselves to respond before you then actually take the action. So I think it goes back to still creating that environment where you can speak up, but then equally communicating your intent and why.
Lynn, did you want to weigh in on that? I saw you popped up there for a moment.
No, I think that's fabulous advice. I was just looking, Carolyn had mentioned psychological safety, and Amy Edmondson is sort of the guru of that. And I just read something that she said that to me is so important in thinking about how leaders communicate right now. She said, you've got to say at all points, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and this is what we're going to do to close that gap. I just love that quote.
Beautifully said. I love that too. You know, when we talk about leadership, many of these leaders are also having to demonstrate leadership at home because they're working and they've got kids. And Carolyn is one of those individuals. You have 3 kids. Tell us where you are and real briefly what process you put in place to manage the kids.
Yeah, so I'm a mother of 3. I have a daughter who's 10 and then 2 boys who are 7 and 5. So needless to say, it is something else being at home, both with my husband also works full-time. We're both in C-level roles. So this has been a real interesting period for our family. So what we've done, very similar to our own selves, is, you know, sat down with our kids. We do a lot of family meetings, especially as we look at our schedules. And, you know, silver lining to this, I really feel, you know, my kids in many ways have stepped up in terms of their scheduling equally. You know, being in a C-level role, you know, earlier today I was communicating with a couple hundred leaders in our company. You know, I've done that from my closet, you know, simply because I'm so scared that the room I'm locked in, one of my kids is going to breach, simply because they don't know, and they don't understand when mom and dad are home. You know, mom and dad now are trying to work. So
I hope everyone at home heard that. I mean, this is not easy, and that you had to make that call from the closet, and you are in your daughter's room right now, right?
I am. This is the one room I can be in where there's running water and a bathroom that my husband's not in, so I don't have to to go out where the kids will, you know, they want to be with me and hang out. So
it's organized the family, as I recall. So you're in charge of one of the children, your husband is in charge of one, and then the nanny is in charge of the other child, right?
That's right. So we're very fortunate. We have a live-in nanny, but you know, with 3 kids trying to do distance learning, I'm sure you're all struggling with this. You know, it takes a lot of intervention and effort. So we've had to be flexible about when we do school hours. We do them from 6 to 8 at night with my, you know, with my daughter. And that's just something both within work and school. I think everybody right now is being, you know, pretty understanding and and flexible as we, as our families learn to cope with all this.
For sure. And, one of my favorite things about this, and even this conference right now, the Zoominar, I get to see everybody where they are. And it's almost the quintessential integration of work and life, right? I can see you guys. It's so cool. Lynn, talk a little bit about that, the challenge that, leaders and at all levels we face. We're trying to work. There's a lot of commotion around. I got a parakeet who's suddenly become very vocal.
Yes, it's unbelievable. And everybody's now heard the term Zoom exhaustion about trying to deal with this constant. And we're in that so many hours a day. And it's, from what we're finding humanly, it's a lot more tiring than being with people in person. But it's amazing to me what we're learning. Let me just tell you what I think is the most interesting thing I've seen is how adaptable people are. There's a great video out there, to Carolyn's point of being home with kids, of Jacinda Ardern, from the Prime Minister of New Zealand. She's sitting on her sofa, and it's like an hour-long talk with the country, and she's in her sweats, and she's just put her toddler to bed. It is very much worth looking at for a leadership lesson, and just as we think about how we are all adapting to this. But we've heard of people that have figured out how to, companies that have gone completely remote over a weekend, and they couldn't figure out the security issues for that before. It's remarkable. But I think the hardest folks that are having the toughest time to me are the ones with very little ones at home.
Absolutely.
And
it's a lot
two
of
parents trying to work.
Yeah, a lot of additional stress. All right, we put together some tips for everybody. So before we break it down for you and get to those, there are 5 that we've come up with. I wanted to go ahead and invite you to send us your questions, because in about 15 minutes, we're going to open this up for questions. We want to hear what you all think and what you're wrestling with in your industry. So let's go ahead and go to the question. Oh, and you can send your questions via chat. There should be a bar, depending on what device you're on, possibly in the lower right-hand corner, it says chat. You can send it to me directly, and then I'll know to call on you. But let's go ahead and go to this graphic, because we have these 5 tips that we've come up with. And these are just some things that we can think about that demonstrate leadership rather than just simply managing, and we want to go through those now. So the first is acceptance and transparency, the chance really to talk about how this affects your organization and what you're doing about it. So Lynn, actually talk a little bit about that, because this is sensitive. I mean, this is a tough time. You look at industries like the airline industry. How transparent should you be with your folks, and how do you wrestle with that and draw that line?
I think it's pretty tough, but I also think that human beings read emotion. So if you're trying to hide things, people just see that, they know that, they can hear that in a voice, they can certainly see that in a face if you're on video. And that quote from Amy Edmondson of here's what we know, here's what we don't know, this is what we're going to do to close the gap. But really being as honest and as transparent as you possibly can, even if you're saying, people are going to ask you, are there going to be layoffs? And the answer has to possibly be, we don't know. We'll let you know as soon as we know. And be as honest as you can about the financial situation.
Right. So Carolyn, have you had to have some of those difficult conversations? And what is that like to have to be so open?
Yeah, we absolutely have, and I think Lynn touched on it, having a flat information structure. And we made that decision very early on, that we were going to be as, transparent as quickly as possible. It's kind of a crisis management communication technique 101. And I think it certainly has applied throughout the global pandemic. I think, as a leader, if you're authentic to your message, it's to me very easy and natural. And, you know, there's a number of times where I've just simply had to say, hey, I don't know, I'm going to have to get back to you on the next call, or I'll follow up over email. And that's okay. People are generally pretty understanding.
Great. And the next tip is to be present and to be visible and to be available. So again, this goes back to the importance of communicating, but I'm hearing from a lot of leaders who are, you know, back to putting out fires. They don't have time to be visible and to communicate because they're on the front lines dealing with keeping the lights on, literally. And those roles, it really is a matter of life or death. So talk a little bit about that challenge, Lynn. Like, how much do you need to communicate?
I think you need to communicate, and you also need to keep reminding yourself to communicate, and to communicate humanly. I've seen this happen. Somebody asked us, she's on the leadership team, and she said, how do we get our leaders to pay attention to the people? Because they were putting out fires. They were figuring out what to do financially, what to do with the next steps. I found myself actually doing that. I mean, we're a small business. We were in early April applying for PPP, and we're trying to figure out getting all the data together, all the financials together. I realized I'd been sitting down writing emails, asking for things for like 2 hours without ever a thought that there was a human being at the end of that email. And
you did that?
I did that.
Of all the people, you would be the last person I think who would do that. So you had to catch yourself, and then you had to change.
Had to catch myself, and I think we all have to do that. We have to keep reminding ourselves that we are leading the organization, not just solving problems, that we are all.
Yeah, but I mean, even the president of the United States has cut back on the news conferences, right? It's too time consuming, he said. So Carolyn, what about you? How often are you having to do that? And is that like really hard to put the burning issues aside and step up and have these conversations like you did the other day in the closet with 100 employees?
Yeah, so I mean, we've mentioned the importance of communication during this period, and I'm just a big believer that the more you communicate, the more empowered and confident people feel. You know, if you're, sharing information. So I think I have a time management technique that I've used. Forget the crisis, just in general, that I've just simply had to increase the frequency of cycles on. And what I do is I just always step back and look at, kind of my week or my month and how I'm spending my time to balance it, to best, execute on my role and be the leader I want to be. And I'm having to do that now, just looking at my days, right? Instead of over a period of a week or a month. And I think, to Lynn's point, I've even put little reminders in my calendar, check in on Brad, make sure he's okay. Purposely scheduling, we're doing like an hour trivia over lunch, next Friday with my global team, so that different techniques and means to check in and say, hey, I'm thinking about you. But it's hard because it has to be fresh and it has to be different, because
Genuine.
You can't just swing by and say hi. Exactly.
Right. And do you think along these lines, and in other areas too, that you're developing new best practices that you all will be able to keep in place after COVID-19 is behind us?
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah. I fundamentally think this will change how we work. And I think it will change how we work in a good way. I don't disagree that all the virtual time is a little overwhelming, but frankly, there's probably more virtual time that in many ways levels the work playing field. That's not such a bad thing, especially in large global companies.
I agree. Yeah, there are a lot of reasons for excitement and new things that we're able to do and realize we can do. Okay, so number 3 on the top 5 list, is getting ahead of the crisis. Hi, Jill Kirsch. Getting ahead of the crisis. Certainly, I think that this is something that Carolyn was able to do. And Carolyn, it's remarkable to me that you were with the company for 13 years, and just last year, you moved into the Chief Risk Officer role. Perfect timing. But is there anything else you wanted to add about how you have been sort of ahead of the curve and been able to get ahead of the crisis? Some of the things you did.
Yeah, I think it was early on recognizing and admitting to yourself, wow, this is something novel, and this is something that we've never seen before, and being willing to say, I don't have a playbook for this. I'm just going to have to go through this very quick, learning process, and bring and harness the expertise of the organization to help me through it. And that's where I think this is going to be a huge moment for women leaders, where we know, a lot of our strengths are around driving collaboration. And this could not be more of an example why that's so important.
Yeah, good point. I think what's happening today during these few month period will be remembered for sure for years to come. So Lynn, anything else about getting ahead of the crisis, especially now as we're pivoting, because the pandemic is changing shape and our reaction to it has to change as well?
Yeah, I think, to Carolyn's point, we are seeing things happen in absolutely new ways, and seeing people do things faster than I have ever seen before. And I don't think we're going to forget that. And I think we're involving more people. Something we saw in the health system we were working with that had the big research institute, they just suddenly decided to come together and figure out what they should be focusing on then. And they figured.
Oops, I lost you for a minute. I'm sure we'll get you back in a second. But I liked what Lynn just said, acting quickly. So often we want to wait and think things through, but it seems that the message really is right now, and Carolyn to weigh in on this, we got to move fast. We got to make some decisions quickly. And so you run the risk of making a mistake, right?
Absolutely. No, it's for sure. But I think just like the approach you're taking with reopening sites, it's so important to pilot. I mean, when you do an experiment, you don't do it across the whole population. You pilot, learn, adapt, and expand. So.
Okay, and still do it really quickly.
That's right.
All right, so the next point is to demonstrate care and empathy. You've heard a lot about this already this afternoon. We've been talking about that, the importance of addressing the human toll. Really that's what leadership is, right? Focusing on your employees and your clients, the people involved. If another good thing came out of this whole ordeal, it's that I think we focus on that as a priority, right? People. So Lynn, are you back with us? Can you talk to this a little bit? Because when I think of an empathetic leader and a coach who encourages that, you come top of mind. Okay, we're going to wait and see if we can get Lynn back live with us. Carolyn, will you talk about that a little bit? How you mentioned a little bit about how you demonstrate that empathy. You're making calls to people. What else are you all doing? Are you sending out newsletters to everybody, getting them to, we heard about one organization, they were making masks for people and doing special things like that.
Yeah, I think this moment is going to force people to really, and force companies really to deeply understand their purpose and connect their purpose with their work more, number one. I also think, this has been, authenticity, I think, has been kind of a nice to have in leadership. It's one of the things that we've seen, come across in a lot of the in a lot of the literature around leadership. But, we're all in large global organizations, and there's a number of folks, that we see who don't necessarily embody those, those attributes. And I think this moment will really start to change that. Authenticity is no longer a nice to have. It's a requirement, and we see it across all industries and politics and different fields, that there's a real change in modern leadership, I think.
Cool. I think so too. And Lynn, if you're back on, just sort of jump in there. But, when I think about demonstrating care and empathy, we're doing it for the employees, we're doing it with our clients, with your family. But one concern that I have, and we're hearing a lot about this on the news with all the healthcare givers as an example, and all of the leaders so focused on those around you. What about self-care? We hear put the oxygen mask on first. Carolyn, what are you doing to make sure you're okay?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. It was funny. I was talking with one of my peers yesterday that when you're at home, it's really hard. Those lines blur between, work and home. And it's easier when you're physically able to leave your office, come back to your house. You can kind of more mentally separate, if you will. So, and we were talking about how, gosh, I've just been busier than ever. And it's not just because of the crisis. So I think a couple of things. One, my kids certainly helped me with with that abrupt stop. I think, the other thing is just making sure I've really made it a priority to continue to exercise and try to keep as much and preserve as much of your routine as possible during this period, because at some point we will go back. And I think that makes that a little more seamless.
Okay, so you and I had this conversation before we got on the program today. It's hard to do though. Does it creep up on you? Are you, eating Doritos all the time? Are you having bouts of anxiety? Because this is a tough time for all of us.
Yeah, it is. I mean, obviously, listen, I have over 4,000 employees that I genuinely worry the decisions and the direction that I'm taking, God forbid something happens. So, or one of them becomes infected, and it's really, very severe situation. So, I think it's, it is really important to, even though we're all at home, but take time off, do those things that are your de-stressors, whether that's just going out for a walk, whatever, but physically separating from your space. I think it's so important to think, not just about everybody else, but, equally about yourself.
Right. And that just flows right into the next tip that we have, the next area that we wanted to focus on, which is staying positive and being solution focused, and that leaders are really dealers in hope, and that we want to make sure to focus on the purpose of the company and really engage and motivate those we are working with. And at the same time, you may not feel so positive. I know there was a point where my son, we thought that he might have coronavirus, and real fast, I had a real clear understanding of what it was like to worry about somebody you love so much, and the idea that you could even go to them and take care of them. So, when you wrestle with those things, how do you continue to stay really upbeat because you want to inspire and pump up your teams? Carolyn?
Yeah, I think, obviously as leaders, we're trained for this somewhat. And, by nature, I'm a pretty optimistic person. But, I think it's also about recharging, going back to the sources of what gives you energy as an extrovert. Let me tell you, this has been really hard. But there's ways to do it through your family, your friends, but that's kind of what's keeping me going. I also think about what's ahead, right? It won't be like this forever. We know, we're seeing firsthand in China as things come back to normal. It will be different, but this shelter at home won't be forever. So it's, evangelizing that message and equally being empathetic that there are people out there that are really, have hardships right now.
Right. We're going to open it up to questions in a minute, but good point about China. I have a brother who lives in China, and I know you have the business there, so it's nice to see that things are coming back. You talk for just a moment about that. I think that would be really interesting to everybody.
Yeah, well, at least what we're hearing from our folks on the ground, and my husband's with a large global organization with a number of factories on the ground there, that, you know, for all intents and purposes, aside from wearing a face mask, which was something in Asia, I lived in Korea for a year, you just did anyways. It's kind of has been part of the culture, at least for the last few decades. But for the most part, you know, operations are really starting to get back to the way they were. So that's good.
Yeah, that is definitely good to see. Very encouraging. All right, we're going to go to some of your questions right now. Lisa, who is with my team, she's amazing. Thank you, Lisa Herman, for everything you've been doing. But Lisa will unmute everybody, and so we can hear some of your questions. This question from Nancy Crawford. Nancy, put on the glasses. Nancy Cranford, great question about transparency. Are you with us, Nancy?
Let's see.
Yeah, there's a mute button on the bottom left-hand toolbar at the bottom of your screen. If there is, Nancy, we can see you and hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
We can.
Awesome. And I see Lynn Turknett's back, so I'm really glad.
Good.
I just had a question. Lynn, from my experience, is just always so knowledgeable on exactly the kind of things that you can say to someone to help them be comfortable with being authentic, being transparent, even being comfortable saying that I'm hiding in a closet afterwards to let people know, hey, we're all in this together. So just was wondering if Lynn could give us maybe some of the things that she's learned or found helpful to people.
Great. Some other tips, Lynn, and welcome back. And also, if you're not talking, please keep your microphone on mute. Thank you. Lynn, are you back?
Oh, she was.
She was. I see Bob Turknett, who's the co-founder of Turknett Leadership Group. Do you want to try to tackle that one? Carolyn, I know you've been very transparent. You've been very forthcoming with us.
Oh no, she was.
It's technology. Carolyn, you want to go ahead and take a crack at a little bit more, any other tips for being transparent and how you can do that comfortably?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some things that I've said that have really resonated with folks. I think a couple of things, because especially with a lot of virtual work environments, I'm also chairing a task force in our industry that's, you know, helping us collaborate. And so a lot of folks, you know, we compete against each other. So let's be real, right? So it's not, you know, it's not innate for us to really do a lot of sharing. So I find using a lot of techniques around curiosity and you know, as we're going through, you know, topics, we'll try to force each other to ask a lot of questions, and, you know, and talk about, hey, I'm asking you this question, not to challenge you, but, you know, to really better understand, you know, why your organization is doing this versus ours, which has taken a different approach. So I think using curiosity words, I also, I use the expression a lot, never waste a crisis, because it does motivate action. And in leadership, we know action is, you know, what we're constantly trying to influence, and that's so much easier said than done. So I think those are probably a couple of things that I've said that have really resonated and helped change the paradigm.
One of the questions we just received has to do with, as people are going back to do the business, back into the workplace, how do you allay some of those concerns? What are you telling people? Are you requiring them to wear protective gear? How are you addressing that?
Yeah, I think we're doing a couple of things. One, of course, you know, we're not discouraging or encouraging, you know, people to, you know, wear masks or PPE. I mean, who even knew what PPE was 2 months ago, right? I didn't. I had to Google the term, right? So I think we're saying you have to do what makes you comfortable, and that's, you know, that's what's most important. I think equally, you know, some of the things we're doing with our sites is saying, listen, you know, our organization, we're a technology company. You know, like many organizations, we basically went to almost 100% work from home, literally in a week. And there were a couple of bumps in the road, but we were very successfully able to do that. So we're very fortunate in many ways to say, hey, listen, you know, we're opening it up for people who want the mental break of coming back into a facility, but equally, if what makes you the most comfortable is working from home, continue to work from home, and we'll still do everything virtually like we are today. It's just seeing both sides of the that there are people who really desperately want that change of pace of getting out of their house back into a physical office.
So that's really important. You're giving the option to do that. We're doing that at the upcoming PINK event, August 28th. We'll give people the option to have their swag bag and their program and their box lunch from their workplace or their home office. We don't have Lynn back yet, but we do have Susan Hitchcock. So I'm going to put Susan Hitchcock, who also was with Turknett Leadership Group for many years, on the hot seat, because I know we have some more questions. Susie, you had a question. Susie, do you want to ask your question? I don't, there, you hear me, right? Susie, did you want to ask your question? I saw here you had a question about organization reduce your real estate footprint. We're seeing a lot of companies scale back and making those decisions to reduce their real estate. Well, Carolyn, are you all doing that?
So I think, so I think a couple of things, you know, throughout the crisis, you know, we don't believe in gut reacting, if you will, to the crisis. I think unquestionably, like most organizations, we, you know, of course, we'll look at our physical footprint, but I think that has to go hand in hand with how as an organization you want your new normal of working ways of working to be. So I think that's, I wouldn't advise that you make that gut decision, you know, out of the crisis. You really be thoughtful and strategic and planful about how that integrates with your employee experience and how you want to work. And I think that really takes some time to thoughtfully think through.
So Susan Hitchcock is joining us. Hi, Susan, can you hear me?
I hear you, yes.
Oh, and you sound fantastic. How are you?
I'm well.
Great.
Out here in Swami Land.
Nice. Well, what do you think about what you're hearing today? I would love you to weigh in on this whole idea of managing versus leading and how we can sort of get to that level and really take advantage of this situation to do some really good things.
Well, I think, first of all, it's been incredible to hear Carolyn, whom I haven't met before today, and to learn exactly what she's going through. I'm in a situation where affiliated with the Turknett Leadership Group, but I have been off staff for a while. And so I am not in a day-to-day leadership role as I have been for many, many, many years before. But I have so much respect, even more than I think I have ever had before, for people that I know who have gone beyond anything that I have seen before in terms of demonstrating leadership and doing things. It's so much, I don't see it as much management anymore going on as I see leaders at all levels, no matter what the title, what the role, people are stepping up. They are doing things that need to be done. They are looking out for their team members. I am so encouraged by the challenge that this has presented and the response that I'm seeing. And just last week, we had two amazing women. We had our, you know, that I lead a Women in Leadership forum once a month. And we've been doing them on virtually for the last 2 months. And last month, we had two women who are helping others around the world to be change agents and catalysts. And to hear, I continue, of course, to be excited about hearing what women are doing during this time and how we are doing all the roles we've always had, but also I think people are someone said now if our spouses or partners may be home, they're actually seeing women not only do their work, but doing all the other things that we have always done. And I'm also encouraged by the fact that I think some more things are being done at home, shared responsibilities. Some people who follow me on Facebook know that I have shared some of the things my husband has been learning. He's doing a great job of vacuuming. He's doing a great job of learning how, I joked and said that he was learning how to cut hair and do nails. That's not true. Nonetheless, I'm very encouraged by how much people are doing these days with regard to stepping up.
Thank you so much, Susan, for sharing that. It's really, really true. We are getting to see a lot of that. How many of you have felt some anxiety around leadership over the last month or so? Raise your hand if you have, so we know it's true. I guess I'm the only one right now. I see Lisa. Anyway, so Carolyn, do you want to weigh in one more time with any final thoughts? And then I guess we'll wrap it up because it's a little bit pretty close to the hour.
Yeah, I think a couple things. Obviously, this crisis is going to have a profound impact on how we all work. But I'd leave you with a couple of thoughts. One, and I said it earlier, I think this is going to be an incredible opportunity for what are widely recognized as strengths of women leaders coming out of this crisis. And, equally, I think, and I say it to my team every day, never waste a good crisis. This is really a moment that's going to make a number of folks careers, and where it's an opportunity for them to truly step up and demonstrate a lot of the leadership that we've, and attributes that we've talked about on the call. I also think that the sense of community, so often on social media and other places, that focuses so much on our differences. I do think that this really helps with broadening, the global community, frankly, as it's all something we're going through together. And
right.
So those are the couple things I'd leave you with, Cynthia.
Good point. Thank you, Carolyn, so much. Thank you for taking your time with us. And I've got to say, it is fantastic to see so many of you out there. Janice and Annette and Julie Bird watching from San Diego. So next time we're going to absolutely get so many more of you on screen, because we want to hear you and we want to address what you're going through. And pretty much everybody on this Zoominar, I think, has a lot to contribute as well. So we'd love to hear from more of you. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up for now and just let you know, remind you that we will be offering Zoominars on the last Thursday of every month. So hope you'll join us next time on May 28th. We'll be talking about managing stress and anxiety for your employees and also other leaders in the organization. And then in June 25th, it's motivating, engaging, and holding your remote workers accountable. And then July 30th, we'll talk about top priorities after the pandemic. Won't that be great to talk about? So the PINK event, the next PINK event will be live on August 28th. You all will be invited. We'll be able to live stream it thanks to Cox Enterprises, which is our technology sponsor. And so we'll be really happy to have them participate. We've got a lot of fantastic sponsors, and I do want to thank them for sticking with us during this crazy time. And our sponsors, UPS and Truist, the Home Depot, Southern Company, Atlanta Homes and Lifestyles. So thank you to all of them. We'll be sending you a link so you can hear about details about upcoming PINK events. Hope you're receiving the newsletter. There will be discounts, even some prizes. But most of all, I just wanted to thank everybody so much for being part of the PINK community, for all of your demonstrations of leadership. We appreciate you. We wish you, your colleagues, and loved ones courage and safe passage, and even, as we heard today, the chance to thrive during this challenging time. So be well, everyone. Bye.